In the previous video, we discussed the passage of digested food, known as chyme, and how it went through the pylorus and in the stomach, and then in through the pyloric sphincter as it made its way to the small intestine. Before we go further into the small intestine, there's a few accessory organs that we should talk about because they play a really big role in getting food ready to be absorbed. So first up, the liver comes into play. We previously mentioned hepatic circulation in our discussions on the circulation of blood, but here's a really quick recap. The stomach and intestines all have these veins that go directly from the organ into the liver. The idea is that as we ingest food and drugs and toxins, that blood will get filtered into our liver where it can metabolize it or break it down into something the body can use. Metabolization involves using chemical processes to transform one substance into another. So we've talked about this before when we talked about converting glucose into ATP, and we use that for energy. Another example is alcohol. If you drink alcohol, it goes into your stomach, gets absorbed into your liver, and there's an enzyme in your liver that breaks it down into something that our body can actually use and excrete. The reason that you get drunk when you have too much alcohol is because your liver can only break down so much. It's at a certain rate it can break it down, and when you drink more than that rate, you start getting the side effects. So your liver serves as this master metabolizer, breaking down all of the ingested food, chemicals, and drugs into usable components. On top of that, your liver also produces bile, and this is a substance that aids fat in digestion. So liver cells generate the bile, and then it flows through the liver into two ducts, the left and right hepatic duct. From there, the hepatic ducts drain into the common duct and the cystic duct. The cystic duct allows bile to be stored into a gallbladder until needed, while the common bile duct connects the gallbladder and the liver to the small intestine. So as we eat fatty food or we have food with carbs in it, we can dump our bile in there, and that helps break down that fat. The other significant accessory organ of the GI tract is the pancreas. We've talked about the pancreas from the endocrine perspective. Remember, we said it secretes insulin and helps us regulate our blood sugars. For the GI system, it has a different purpose. The pancreas releases pancreatic juices, which change the pH from the chyme as it gets into the small intestine. Remember, it starts as chyme mixed with hydrochloric acid, so it's really low pH, very strong acid. But when we mix the pancreatic juices, it brings it up closer to a pH of 8. This pH shift allows other enzymes and other chemicals and bacteria to break down some of these carbohydrates. So go back to that alimentary system now that we've talked about a few accessory organs. In the previous video, we were in the stomach. The food was mixed to become chyme. We're leaving the stomach through the pylorus and in through that pyloric sphincter, where we enter the first segment of our small intestine, the duodenum. The small intestine shares the same layers we discussed earlier. It's got a mucosa, a submucosa, a muscularis, and a serosa. The mucosa of the small intestine is lined with microvilli, tiny finger-like projections that enhance nutrient absorption. The majority of the nutrient absorption from the consumed food takes place in the small intestine. Apart from the duodenum, there are two other parts of small intestine, called the jejunum and the ileum. Lastly, as we kind of finish up our journey through the GI tract, we get to the large intestine. This is also called the colon. The large intestine has three sections. Starting from that lower right quadrant, there's the ascending colon, followed by the transverse colon, and then finally the descending colon. So your large intestine kind of wraps all the way around the perimeter of that small intestine, and its main purpose is to remove the final nutrients and moisture out of the chyme. There's bacteria that live inside the colon, and they break down the last bits of proteins and carbs, and then whatever's left, that final waste product, is what we call stool. And that stool gets expelled through the rectum. Just at the beginning of that ascending colon, we have a little tiny pouch, and that's called the appendix. For a long time, physicians and healthcare professionals thought that the appendix had really no purpose, and because it was known to get infected, inflamed, and cause lots of issues, it was often removed prophylactically. So if you were getting a C-section or you were getting some other type of surgery, they'd often snip your appendix while they were in there. We now know that the appendix acts as a bit of a reservoir or a bank for good gut bacteria. So it holds on to that bacteria in case we get sick. So for example, we get diarrhea or we take a bunch of antibiotics and that kills all the bacteria in our gut. Your appendix holds on to that good stuff just so we have something to replenish it with.